Hi, friends, and welcome to Only Green. Today, we have with us an eminent and passionate wildlife conservationist, a very powerful and talented author, and an environmentalist, Miss Neha Sinha. She is currently associated with Bombay Natural History Society as a conservation biologist. Amongst the many environmental projects and campaigns that she has bolstered is the Amur Falcon Campaign in Nagaland, the biggest conservation success story of recent times. In this regard, she works on the ground in Nagaland and Manipur, creating awareness and education among local communities as well as at the policy level through advocacy and environmental education programs. During using her knowledge, oratory skills, and bold penmanship, Neha has trained hundreds of people ranging from media, conservationists, citizens, forest guards, and tribals in the basics of biodiversity, policy, and advocacy. Her articles on the environment are regularly featured in publications like the Economic and Political Weekly, the Hindu, and Daily O, and she's also a consulting editor, environment for the Wire, and a reviewer for Current Science. In her first book, Wild and Wilful, she says, I always think about our place in this world. We believe that we are owners instead of just a part of it. We tend to forget that we live in a society and not an economy, and that the natural world is very much outside our control. With this background, let me welcome Ms. Neha, and let's try and understand her various passions and also her views on wildlife conservation. Ms. Neha, first of all, let's start with your background, maybe studies, and how you got passionate about wildlife and how you developed a passion for this. Let's try and understand that.
Thank you so much, first of all, for having me. And I apologize we couldn't do this earlier like you wanted because I was in the field. So, Abby, I was actually a senior reporter. I was a journalist. I used to work for the Indian Express newspaper, and I've always loved environment and wildlife. It's always been something that I feel does not get enough representation. So, like, I'm so
Okay.
happy, for example, that you take out time from your life to have a channel that focuses on environment. And I think environment belongs to everybody and not just to people like me who have studied it or practicing it. And that's why we're talking on a Sunday, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Because it's a passion. So I used to cover environment. I used to cover many things, of which environment was one. But I realized more and more that a lot of issues were extremely negative or extremely problematic, and I wanted to see if it's possible to make a contribution that's constructive and positive. That is to actually work in the field. So I studied conservation science. Like I quit journalism and I went to study conservation science. Then I came back to India and I started working in conservation. And while I would love to study, hornbills in a forest and just be in a forest and look at birds, I felt that there was a gap in law and advocacy and policy, because we have people, think tanks, and people working on other fields that are extremely established and important. So you have so many people thinking about foreign affairs, about economy, about demonetization. You have planning commission or the Niti Aayog, and in wildlife we just don't have that. We don't have people who are focusing on how policy should be or how laws should be. And so therefore my focus is actually on law and policy, but of course fieldwork is the basis of everything that I do. So I try to spend time in the field, and then so my work for the Bombay Natural History Society is on conservation and on policy. And other than that, as an individual, I write columns. I do my best to raise issues, of why wildlife is important. And at the end of the day, all of this is just to make sure that wildlife becomes visible to people and to the government and to communities, and it should figure in our decision making processes. So whether you're building a city, whether you're building a port or a mine or a dam, you cannot make wildlife invisible. It tends to be invisible to everyone, except for people like us who like it. But for people who don't actually like wildlife or don't think that it's important, I think it's part of my mission to make it visible and to say, as you read out from the book, that we don't own this world, we're just part of it. We are one part of this world, and we shouldn't behave like we own everything, because we don't. Yeah.
Now, I mean, coming to your the one of the main passions that you have, which is bird watching. You've been when during our interactions, even though it was very minimal, I understood that you're very passionate about bird watching. This is something which a normal person might not understand in terms of what you gain out of it. So, can you please throw a bit of light on what exactly is bird watching? What are the basics of bird watching, the gears required for bird watching, and what is the outcome from doing bird watching?
Right. So, many of us like to have a passion, something that we can pursue just for the love of it, not just to, make money, or not just to become famous, but just because we love something. And some people like gardening, some people like, collecting stamps, some people like making videos, and some people like bird watching. And the reason I like bird watching is because it combines a few things that I like. So, bird watching is basically trying to observe birds in their natural environment as much as possible. And sometimes it's not a natural environment, it's a modified environment like a city. So a lot of us live in cities, and one of the reasons why bird watching has become so popular is because birds are everywhere. So wherever you're living, your housing complex will have a nest, of some
That's
bird,
right.
right? And during the pandemic, more and more people wanted to turn to bird watching because they felt so suffocated inside their houses. And my Twitter was flooded with people saying, "There's a bird outside. What bird is it? Is that a nest? What should we do? How can we make life better for the birds?" And so, bird watching combines a few things that can appeal to a person. So, one is exploration, going to a place and
Okay.
exploring that place. So, for example, if there's a wetland near your house, a pond or a lake, maybe a small green belt, it could be a colony park, it could be a maybe a forest, it could be maybe a coastal area. So, for people from Kerala, such as yourself, or people from Tamil Nadu, the coast, if they have access to the coast, there are lots of birds that come to the coast, especially during the migratory season. So, exploration is one aspect. The other aspect is looking at something and identifying it, because there are so many kinds of birds, and a lot of bird watchers enjoy seeing different birds. So during the year, depending on which season it is, there would be different kinds of birds. So during the migratory season, which has started now in India, the birds are coming from Europe, from Russia, from China, and they come from very far places, basically, to us. And in order to be a bird watcher, actually, you don't need much gear. The first thing to know is that you need to have patience. So, like, it helps if you like, looking at a bird or looking at an animal. Uh, we need to kind of be quiet, you know, and look and not make too much noise. And a nice place to start, I always tell everyone, is to be under a tree which is, if it's fruiting or flowering, that's even better. So there are some trees that fruit and that have fruit throughout the year, like banyan trees or peepal trees, the ficus family. So if there's a ficus, otherwise there are seasonal trees. So for example, your amaltas, the one you use for Vishu, when it's
Okay.
flowering, if you go under the tree and you stand there, there will be birds that come. So one
Correct.
easy way to start is to be under a big tree which is either flowering or fruiting. Another way to start is to go to any kind of area near you, like a park or wetland, and go in the morning. It's important to go at the time when birds are active. So usually they're active in the morning or in the evening. And if you go when it's really hot, you may not see a bird. And finally, exploration is there, identification is there. Finally, I think bird watching gives us a chance to be by ourselves, and or to be with people who are like-minded. And I think it's important for us in life to find that community in
Okay.
whatever hobby that we do. So a lot of times we bird watch two groups of two or three. It's nice to have that friendship, which is beyond salaries and beyond Excel sheets and all the regular routine stuff that we have to do in our life. And I think for a lot of people, being outside in nature is also something that cures anxiety, because walking and being amongst plants is good for our immune system. So, I would actually say we should try to get out as much as is possible. Even if you're not bird watching, even if you're not interested in birds, it's important to get out of the house and go for a walk. If it's a natural surrounding, it will boost your immunity. The chemicals that plants use for their own immunity,
Okay.
for their own protection from pests, rub off on us when we walk. So if you walk in a green belt as opposed to walking inside a mall or walking inside a building, you will feel different. So 5 minutes in the green belt will have you feeling refreshed and more, you'd be feeling more healthy, basically.
Other than the basic feel good factor, is there any aspect in terms of um, influencing the policy making or something like that with this activity?
Absolutely. And in fact, I know that I was supposed to talk to a bird watcher today, and the person I was supposed to talk to is a very good example of how bird watchers can give back to society. And bird watchers have really been engaging with policy by, actually making lists of birds and actually monitoring sites. So, for example, if you have a site near you which has birds, for example, it could be a wetland or a forest, you know, what's happening to those birds? Like, are they there all the time? Have they died? Are they poisoned? Are they hunted? How is the site doing? Whether it is under any kind of threat? These are kind of things that bird watchers can help us with, and a lot of bird watchers in India, it's amazing that they are actually doing that, and just making a list of birds and uploading it on, say, eBird or other kinds of such sites or such kind of databases helps us monitor. And, a lot of times environmentalists such as myself, we are looking for data. We are looking for data to understand many things, such as climate patterns, like does it rain more, is it more hot, is it more cold? And we don't have data because we can't be everywhere. And in
That's
this
right.
regard, bird watchers are a great help, and bird watchers from Kerala particularly are especially, very, very helpful. So they've made this bird atlas, which I'm sure you're aware of, in Kerala. And even bird watchers in Tamil Nadu are extremely helpful because they actually want to be part of a bigger movement. So they take their data, which is, these many birds were at this place, and they'll go back to that place and they'll make another list after 1 month or couple of weeks. And in that way, we are able to monitor that site. In that way, we are able to represent to the government that, this is what's happening. Maybe we find a new site that needs protection. Maybe we discover a new place where birds are coming regularly and should be protected. And, finally, a lot of bird watchers are also engaged in activism directly, which is also amazing because when a person loses a site, that person is the first stakeholder. So there are people in the cities of Bangalore, of Hyderabad, of Delhi, of Kolkata who are actually approaching authorities directly, saying, "Don't
Okay.
destroy this wetland, don't cut this forest because it means something to us." Oftentimes, bird watchers are actually on the front line of saving a place.
So, which means there's obviously a lot of documentation that needs to be done along with the bird watching activity as
I
the
mean,
basic activity.
yes, I mean, it's very good if it's done. It's not necessary that you have to do it. Like for those who are
Okay.
interested, like I, for example, sometimes bird watch and I don't make a list, but a lot of bird watchers are very good at making lists every single time they go bird watching. And then they'll be like, okay, this bird is missing. So let me go back and see again after 1 month, whether the bird is there or not. Or they may observe something at the site, such as maybe birds are dead, or maybe there's poison in the water, or maybe there's any other kind of disturbance, construction is coming up that's not legal, and because they're going to the site again and again, they're engaging with it deeply. Basically, I'm not saying
Okay.
every bird watcher needs to do this. I'm just saying that this is part of an important movement of bird watchers,
So
and
you can do it as a
particularly,
you can do it just as a passion or
yes.
and as an educational.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's completely up to the individual. It is great if we have more advocates for birds and wildlife, but even if it doesn't, I think the first thing is to find that curiosity for that animal, which is living a life, which is different because it's not a human being. to have that curiosity, to find that joy of kind of seeing it, that's the first thing.
That's great to know. Yeah. Moving from there, bird watching. I mean, you've been very, very actively involved in the Amur Falcons conservation. I mean, in Nagaland and Manipur. I mean, Nagaland being called as the falcon capital of the world. There's a set of migratory birds that come in from South Africa during. I mean, I think this is the time that they come in, right?
Yes.
October, November times. How did you get into that and the study of these species, and what are the activities that you undertake there?
So the birds come from Russia and Siberia to Nagaland, and from here they'll go to South Africa. So this is a very long journey. So actually, that was actually the falcon hunting was actually brought to notice by a group of bird watchers. So Ram Nivasan, who's based in Bangalore, Haralu, who's based in Nagaland, Shashank Dalvi, who's based in Mumbai, and Roko Hedi Kyotso, who's from Nagaland. So they had actually documented that these Amur falcons were being hunted in very large numbers, and I got involved in the issue because I get involved in many issues in terms of bringing it up with the government, in terms of telling them that something like this is wrong and it's happening, because you're not allowed to hunt in India. It's illegal as per the law. The Wildlife Protection Act says you can't hunt Indian species, but at that time what happened is that nobody was interested in hearing it, because the Amur falcon is the least concerned species, as in there are enough of them in the world, so the authorities were not interested at that time. The central authority was said to me, we are busy with tigers and rhino poaching, so we don't have time for a bird, and nobody had kind of heard of this bird. And my point was that if this bird will be hunted in such large numbers, the numbers were really large. 10,000 birds a day were being hunted. So like, if the hunting is going to be at this scale, then we won't have a population left in just a couple of years. And it's happened in other parts of the world. There's a bird called passenger pigeon in the United States. It was like the blue rock pigeon that we see in India. It was everywhere, but it got hunted, and it got hunted so much. People thought it's such a common bird that they kept hunting it, and finally it's extinct. It's not there on earth anymore. So it is because initially the government, the authorities were not interested, and I felt like maybe we had to intervene. So it's not my project alone. A lot of us work together, and we actually work with the community, and the community decided to give up hunting, and we run eco clubs over there, and we are constantly, working with them to see if we can find a people-based solution, because some of them were hunting and selling the Amur falcons for money, and therefore it is important to also address livelihood issues. And over here it's important to say that while we may focus on the actual animal, a lot of conservation issues are to do with people, and we need to have people-based solutions as well. So it can't just be saying save this animal and that's it. Usually, there could be a reason why something is happening, and we need to tackle that reason also.
Can you talk a little bit about this the process of migration? Because it looks like every October, November season they're here, and from Russia they come down, then they go from here. So it's like an auto-tuned setup. I mean, how does it happen? Migration in such large quantities and in such long distances.
Yeah.
How actually does it happen?
Yeah, it's actually like auto-tune, you're right, because actually they come almost at the same date every year. So basically, usually, in India, the birds are coming from the north. So they come.
What do they come for? Why do they come here?
They come from Siberia, they come from Russia, they come from Europe, because it's very cold there for them. So they actually breed in those areas. But by the time winter comes, the beginning of winter, which is now, it's too cold for them. So in order to come to warmer places to eat and to survive, they come down. And India is so interesting because we are above the ocean. So we are such a big landmass that's above the ocean. So most of the birds that are using this flyway, as in using this migratory route, will stop in India. A few will go to Australia or Indonesia or those kind of places, but most of them stop here. So India is actually a very, very important destination for migratory birds.
It's interesting.
Then when the summer comes, when it starts getting hot, they will leave and they will go back. and then they will breed in summer in those cold places, and then they will
Okay.
come back again here as winter starts. And these are all kinds of birds. These are birds that come to the shores, seabirds. Then there are birds like Amur Falcons that come to forest areas or paddy fields. Then you have birds that come just to agricultural landscapes. So, for example, you have these huge cranes that come from cold places. So you have demoiselle cranes coming, and even flamingos migrate. Flamingo is a
Okay.
big bird, so we even have flamingos coming from Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan to India, and
Okay.
it's this kind of, basically birds don't recognize political boundaries, right?
Okay.
So it's important for us to look at them as visitors who kind of don't really need a visa and a passport, and they're doing this in order to survive. And it's not just birds. Whales migrate, and butterflies migrate, and even dragonflies migrate. So usually they're coming to warmer places for finding food. And
What could be an approximate lifespan of this Amur Falcon if you look at?
Amur Falcon, it would be a few years. I'm not entirely sure, but usually it's a small bird of prey. So a larger bird would probably have a longer lifespan. Actually, it's a very good question. One of the things that we're trying to understand is how many times they're coming.
That's right. That was
And
what I was also trying to
yeah,
find out.
so we have just begun to understand that because some of them are satellite tagged birds. So, they have a satellite tag on them which gives a live location. So, we are in the fifth year of satellite tagging. So, some of them are there still. So, that
Okay.
means it's
Oh,
come 5 times, but it's probably longer lived than that. So, we have to wait and to get first hand information as to how many times it's coming.
so for sure, there are birds that have come here multiple times into
Yes,
India and then gone back. Okay.
absolutely. And sometimes they may die an unnatural death. Like they may collide with a wire, or they may die in some other way, and then the data ends. But that's why it's important to monitor. And sometimes we have bird rings. So the leg of the bird has a ring. So we catch the birds, not Amur falcons, but other kinds of birds, many other kinds of birds. And bird watchers are great help over here because every country has a color for the ring or the flag. So there's a ring with a number on it, or there's a flag which is a particular color. And so we catch them, we put the bird band or the ring or the flag, and then every year photographers are taking pictures.
So
And
it's like
yeah,
stamping a visa.
yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, and that way we're able to tell, where all the bird is going so that we can
Okay.
find the places we need to conserve, basically. Because as you
Okay.
said, it's a really long journey, and, we want to make it comfortable for them, and also
Okay.
it's kind of international conservation in many ways, right? So it's not enough for India to conserve its sites. We also need to
Correct.
talk to Russia. We also need to talk to, South Africa, where Amur falcons go, for example. And we are trying to do that, and I think that's also the role of conservationists, is to make dialogue that is constructive and positive. And, we are working with the government of India to create an office in India for this flyway, for these
Oh,
migratory
okay.
routes, in which we'll work more with Central Asian countries and all the countries on this area to at least save a few sites which are very important for migratory birds.
Can you also just touch upon the various activities that the Bombay Natural History Society is doing? Because that's again a name that is not very popular in this part of the world. I mean, at least in our part of the world. Can you just tell us about the
So
organization?
the Bombay Natural History Society, or the BNHS, is 130, almost 140 years old now, and it's like one of the world's oldest organizations. It actually started as a response uh, against hunting. It started as, at that time, to understand, whether we could kind of not take from wildlife as much as we were taking and regulate our behavior towards wildlife. Today, the BNHS is a scientific organization, so most of our work, all our work, is research based. So we have field projects, and we're researching birds. Tagging birds, ringing birds, for example, is a very important and an old project of BNHS, in which we, as I said, try to understand migratory routes and way before satellite tags came. Satellite tags are more recent, in which it gives out a satellite, it gives out a signal for the satellite. But before that technology came, we were using bands or rings on birds to understand where all they go and how we can save them. And we also have a lot of projects in mitigating conflict. For example, we work in the Satpura landscape to minimize conflict that people may have, living with tigers. We also are trying to study how climate change impacts birds. So we have projects in Sikkim, for example, in which we are trying to see uh, if birds are getting affected because it's getting warmer. So birds of the
Okay.
mountains, how are they getting affected? We have a vulture project that's a flagship project for us. So we were the ones who found in the 90s that the vulture population was crashing. So I don't know if you had vultures where you live when you were
Very
younger.
rare. Yeah.
Yes, but when I was growing up in Delhi, Delhi was full of vultures, and now they're gone. And a lot of the vultures are gone because there's a chemical that poisons them. So it is BNHS who found out that this is happening, and along with our international partners and state forest governments, we set up vulture breeding centers in India. So there's one in Pinjore, the biggest one is in Pinjore, which is near Chandigarh. Then we have one in West Bengal, we have one in Madhya Pradesh, and basically the goal is we are breeding them. It's very difficult to breed them because they are very shy birds, even though they're so big. People associate vultures with bad things, but actually, vultures are really gentle birds which never hurt anyone. They don't hunt, they only scavenge dead carcasses. So, we've been now releasing the vultures into the wild because the point of that project is that we should have vultures again in the sky, and we're also working with state governments and communities to reduce that drug that poisons them. So that drug has been made illegal for use of animals, and we're trying to make sure that that ban is in place. And other than this, we work a lot on policy and law issues with the government. We advise the government, and we have field stations in various states of India. And we also have a very big emphasis on documentation. So, just in the way that you have museums for aircrafts, for example, or you have museums for time, going to space, we need to have museums for wildlife and understanding the world around us, like what is the wildlife that is in our state? What is the wildlife in your state? It will be different from mine.
So you have chapters elsewhere also? Chapters of.
We have members everywhere, and we have offices in various places, and we have a
Okay.
museum in Bombay. Our headquarters are there, where we have many specimens of wildlife. And a lot of people who are doing genetic studies come to our museum to take samples or to look at the animal or the bird or the reptile. And this is now getting digitized. A lot of it is online already, so that
Okay.
people can access. And there are birds that have gone extinct in India, and we have that sample. So we don't want more birds or animals to go extinct. So we have a very big focus on this kind of documentation and having the specimen. So having the specimen of a snake or a cheetah or a bird or any kind of thing. So we have that museum, and anyone is welcome to visit this museum. And
Oh, it's free. It's free for the public. It's
yeah,
open to the public.
it's open and it's free. Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. Now let's come back to your main passion, your book, the book that you had written, The Wild and Willful, a book which was recently released.
Yeah.
You talked about, yeah, that's right. Okay. I we understand that I mean, it has come out from your personal experiences, and you've stressed on the need for coexistence. That we're not the owners; we're also a part of this world. This book actually portrays, as you said, 15 iconic Indian wildlife species that walk alongside us. Can you talk about this book, and what was the reason for you to come out of this book, and what are you trying to communicate or convey to the masses?
So if I were to ask you, name one animal in India, what would you say?
As rightly said by you, tiger, maybe tiger, lion. Yeah,
Tiger, lion, anything else? Any other
yeah,
animal?
elephant. For our part of the world, it is elephant.
Yes,
Is
yes, yes. So, um, So depending on which part of India you're from, you're right. So you're from the south, and there are lots of elephants. Now, suppose I was not in the south. Suppose I was in the north. I would not say elephant because, for example, where I live, there are no elephants. India is such a big country, and there are different wildlife in different places. And I wanted to write a book which captures both the big and the small wildlife, and basically captures, what we are doing to them, the good things, the bad things, whether we can live with them in a way that's less harmful for us and for them. And therefore, this book is um, all about telling the story of the animal and trying to make the person understand that, it deserves to live, first of all. It deserves to
Okay.
live in this world. Second of all, there are things that animals do which we think are crazy or make no sense. Because, for example, if you do something funny, people will say you're a jungly or you're like an animal, right? Now, I'm trying to say this is not, animals don't do things without any meaning. They actually, as we study them, as we study wildlife, we see they're trying to survive a difficult world. And a lot of the things they do that make no sense to us actually make full sense to the animals. So, for example, there's a portion on the elephants in which the elephants are trying to break a wall in Assam. And anybody who's looking will be like, this is a crazy animal, what is it doing? But actually, it's breaking the wall because it was in its corridor, it was in a passage.
Passage.
And
Okay.
actually, that wall came up where it should not have come up. And the elephant calf died hitting its head against the wall. And, I actually cried when I saw that because I think that, what's happening today is that we're developing in a way in which we're not taking animals into consideration. And if you don't take them into consideration, you will have conflict, right? So if you pretend the elephant is not there and you make the wall, there is going to be conflict. And people will also suffer apart from the animals. And therefore, in this book, I'm trying to put the needs of the animal forward. And I also have lots of people in this book, people who are working with animals, people who are living with animals. So tribal people, for example, who live with animals and have ways to live lives without conflict. There's a man in this book who lives with crocodiles, and he lost his arm to a crocodile because of an accident. And still he advocates that, we must live our life in a manner that tries to understand the other creature. And in many ways, the more I study wildlife, the more I study nature, I find that, tolerance is a wonderful quality to have. And, if we learn to do a few things that are considerate of the animal, we may also learn how to be considerate towards each other, right? We live in cities where people fight over parking space. We live in cities or societies where, we get angry at the slightest provocation, and we are not making an effort to understand the other person. But in many ways, understanding wildlife can also be a way towards being a more tolerant person. So, for example, I have a wasp nest in my garden. What am I going to do? Am I going to break it? Am I going to smoke it? Or am I going to let it be? If I let it be, this is going to be the hardest thing for me. If I just let it be, it means for the next 10 days, I can't go to that part of the garden. I have to be careful. I could get stung. But if I actually do that, I think it gives me a better way of understanding where I am in this world. And actually, wildlife has made me a more patient person. Because initially, when I used to try to bird watch or whatever, I wanted to see wildlife, I couldn't see them because they don't come when you call them. They come when they want to come or when it's good for them. You have to go in early in the morning, to go in golden hour in the evening. And I used to get impatient and I couldn't get a good picture till I learned that I need to be patient. And to be honest, patience is one of the most important qualities we need to have in our life. Like, I think our teachers teach us that we should get good marks, but I would say learning to be patient is even more important. Like, even this conversation between us has taken a long time to happen because of various reasons. And if we were not patient, nothing would happen. And there are many lessons that I've learned from wildlife that are in this book. One is patience, the other is tolerance. And finally, there are many extraordinary people in this book, and I would just like people to read about those people. So even if you don't love wildlife after reading this book, I hope that people can feel moved and inspired by the other people. There's a woman called Manjeet in Chhattisgarh who rescues cobras. She's in the city of Raipur, where She goes to people's houses and catches cobras and rescues them and releases them. She has made it her life's mission to speak up for reptiles, which are really difficult to speak up for, because everybody looks at a snake and goes, "We need to kill this," because it's going to be a
There is
big
one person like that in Kerala also.
yeah. But Manjeet is a woman, so it's
Okay,
much harder,
correct. That's right.
have that credibility. And hats off to anybody who handles dangerous animals. Hats off to the person you're talking about as well, because it's not easy. And it's not easy to advocate for something that could actually kill someone, right? Because when I'm saying save birds, birds are so easy to save, right? Because no bird is going to come and kill you. But when we're talking about reptile conservation, if it's a venomous reptile like a cobra, a king cobra, a crate, a viper, these are really difficult questions for society to answer. And people like Manjeet tell us the 5 things that we can do to avoid conflict. Because it is possible to live alongside that animal without having conflict. A lot of people who live with traditional knowledge know how to avoid that conflict. But as we start living in cities, we begin to forget everything. And we begin to want a world where there's no animal. Like people want to cut trees because leaves fall on their car, for example. Because we want to
Okay.
live a life where, there's nothing outside our control.
And this is the message that you want to actually convey. I mean, how can I get this book?
Well, it's in bookstores, it's on Amazon. I can
Okay,
send you a link, you can put it in the YouTube video and
okay,
in the caption. Basically, there are 15 animals in this book. So you have leopard, you have elephant, you have tiger, you have butterflies, you have migratory birds like Amur Falcons and rosy starlings, you have the gangetic dolphin. And gangetic dolphin is very close to my heart because it's actually an animal that lives in the water and people don't see it much because it's in the water, right? And uh, India is very important for gangetic dolphin because most of the breeding populations are in India. So just like India is
where
important
exactly in India?
for tigers,
Where in India
these
these
are the
dolphins are?
rivers. These are the rivers more towards the north. So
Okay,
Ganga, Chambal. It used to be in the Yamuna as well. So the entire river system in the north, and but it's a blind animal first of all, and it finds its way through echolocation the way bats do. So it makes a clicking sound, and through echolocation it is able to tell where it is going. And lots of ships, lots of pollution, lots of disturbance. It's a very shy animal, so it's getting impacted by dams, by pollution, by ships, and any kind of disturbance in the water disturbs the animal. And my point is, again, I'm not saying stop doing everything on the river. I'm saying there's an animal in the river. So, however, the way that we plan it, has to take its needs into account as much as possible. We should accommodate giving passages to animals as much as is possible. We need to, make them part of the conversation. So, for example, if you're planning something for the river, we plan for trade and commerce, and we plan for tourism. It's also important to plan for wildlife. And um, by making these animals visible, my hope is that everybody who reads it would want to address some of these issues. It's not just always
good.
the government, sometimes it's us as well, right?
Can really see that love and passion that with which you're talking about it. I mean, it's really interesting. I think this is one book that we all should get our hands on. The link for the link for how to get the book will be there in the description. Continue. You were saying something.
Yeah, so I was saying that, I think that, it's a very rich country that we have, and I think all our memories are connected to nature in some way. So, like when it's hot, we may eat a particular thing which is good for us, which is very seasonal. So, for example, that burnt mango drink, do you have it like we have it in the north, in which we burn the raw mango and we make a drink out of it? Or, when the new neem leaves come, when the neem leaves are pink, we make a chutney out of
Okay.
it. When it's
Oh,
the
okay.
beginning of you're supposed to have a bitter thing in the beginning of summer. It cleanses
Okay.
the body. And in the way that, for example, in Kerala, you have a relationship with the amalthas flower, that yellow flower that you give during the
Okay.
season. So people,
Konna. We call it konna in Malayalam. Yeah.
yeah, you call it konna. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so you know when it's going to flower, and your festival is around the time that it's
Correct.
going to flower, right? And uh, this, we are so connected to nature. A lot of our customs are connected to nature. So, for example, in a worship, a particular flower that is only found there or only found at that time of the year, the things that we eat, the local fruits or the local, like I said, there are seasonal things we eat. So, for example, in winter, you should have makke ki roti, which is a kind of hard roti, which is good. It keeps your body warm. Or you may have something else that you're eating in Kerala, which, keeps you good for that season. And I think that, all of this is connected to the way that to the fact that there's so much rich biodiversity in India, and
Okay.
the fact that we are not just a market for products. We are also it's a complex society which interacts with all these things, the plants, the animals, and nature. And it would be a shame to lose it. And I really hope that animals, or even there are plants that are not doing well, that are endangered in India. We shouldn't lose them in our lifetimes. And there is climate change, it's a big threat. So here in the north, we have had so much rainfall, that the hills have just had landslide after landslide, and people have died. Like just today in the paper, all these trekkers have died. They were trekking in Himalayas. Before that, tourists died because of the landslide. So the climate is changing. So
Correct.
every year you have more than one cyclone that comes to the coast, right? So this year we had two cyclones that came, and I think it is also hotter. The summers are longer, and the rainfall is very strange and weird now. Like it rains at any time. In October, it rained a lot here, for example, and generally speaking, species that are not doing well are not going to do well now. The
Oh,
ones that already are endangered or less in number, as the climate keeps changing, it's not going to be easy for them. So there is a crisis, okay, and we need to, I think, be a little considerate towards these things. And we can't do everything, but as citizens, I think we have the power to kind of speak up for a few things, and we should try to do that as much as possible.
one other topic that I wanted you to touch upon is the a term which we very often hear these days, but then we very I mean, very little that we understand about it, which is urban diversity. I think you've mentioned some of it when you talked about your book, but then can you throw some more light on that particular term that needs to be taken care of in these days?
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. During the pandemic, did you have a lockdown? You had a lockdown, right?
Yeah, we
So
had.
you had a lockdown. So what is the one thing you wanted to do more than anything during the lockdown? In terms of, like, you must have been at home, right? You must have been at home. What is the thing that you wanted to do the most?
Go out, meet friends.
Yeah. And I think during the pandemic, we realized how important it is to go out, right?
That's right.
Because sometimes what happens is that we feel tired and we want to go home and we want to rest.
That's right.
But I think we want to be at home and we want to rest, and we also want to go out. We need both things, right? And
That's right.
one of the things the pandemic showed us is that it's important to have spaces to go out. So I don't just mean restaurants, I don't just mean malls. I mean places where we can walk, right, as people.
Okay.
We need places where we can walk and just be outside in a safe place. So whether it's a park or whether it's a forest, we need these spaces in order to live. And everybody should have access to such a place, which is a safe place to walk in. That's outside, that's outdoors. And many people felt anxiety because they could not go out, but also because they couldn't see anything from their window. There are people who live and the buildings all around them, so they can't see anything. They can only see another person's window. And I think it showed us how important it is to be able to see kind of landscapes, to be able to see trees or water bodies or just an open area. So, a river, for example, is also an open area. And to be able to see in the distance is very important for us. I don't think we realize that on a day to day basis because we are living very busy lives. At the end of the day, you just want to have a beer and just want to, be chilled out. But it's also important for us as people because we're actually animals. I think we forget that all the time. Human beings are also animals, and we need to be outside. So to answer your question about urban biodiversity, what I'm trying to say is that cities are important places because we all live in cities, and cities are also going to grow. There are going to be more cities and more people will live in cities also. There's going to be more urbanization, but we need to plan our cities in a way that allows for these kind of open spaces. So if you think about what are your favorite places to go in a city, you may say a restaurant where you go with your friends, or you may say, something that has some nostalgic value, but you will probably also say some open area which you may like to walk in. And the point about urban biodiversity is that we need to plan our cities not just as buildings, but also places with these open areas. So if there is a river in your city, the city plan needs to place that river in an important place. If there's a forest or a mountain range, there are many cities with mountains in them or hills in them. We need to preserve some of these natural things because it will be important for us to access them, and it's also important for that place because so what sets Delhi apart from other cities is the fact that we have Aravalli Hill range inside the city. Otherwise, every city is the same, right? I'm trying to suggest the natural features of a city are part of its unique character. And I'm also trying to say that, a city is a unit of planning where we must have nature and wildlife as a component. And it's an important way to understand how we can plan other places also. Because city planning is something that happens in front of our eyes. So if I'm saying that India should not cut this much percentage of forests, or we need to have this much coastline free of forts or thermal power plants, I need to understand how to plan. And I think a city is a nice template. And all over India, citizens are standing up for cities and having, open areas in cities. So you have this people in RA in Bombay saying don't cut RA forest. You have people in Haryana saying don't cut Aravali forest. You have people in Bangalore saying don't make this flyover here because there are too many trees that will get cut. Because every flyover is the same, but for people who live there, who look at those trees, it's important for them. It's part of their landscape. And I think it's a wonderful thing that people are taking our time. And these are not people who are environmentalists as a profession. These are like normal people who do normal things, but they're taking our time from their lives to say that, give us a voice in planning the city, give us a voice in planning the city that we are living in, and give us a voice in planning the city in a way that it allows for nature. And urbanization is going to increase in India. And not only will more people be living in cities, that's what the trends say, but we will have more towns becoming cities. So this is always going to be an ongoing process in which we have to plan our cities. So smart cities can't just be, good transport. It also has to be how many trees, how many water bodies, uh, preserving the natural drainage of the area, the natural ecosystem.
It's sort of a balance between development and environment protection. That's what we
Absolutely.
need to, because
Absolutely.
that's a debate that goes on and on. Sustainable development versus environmental protection. I think
Yes.
that's what you're trying to convey.
Yes.
One last thing, message to our viewers, especially maybe youngsters. What is it that you want to say to them regarding wildlife conservation? I mean, you've been talking about a lot of points, but then in nutshell, what is it that you want to convey to them?
I want to say that there are many things that make India special. One is the wonderful clothes we have, the beautiful languages we speak. So, the sari is a wonderful thing that, that's so Indian. The food that we eat, which is so famous all over the world, Indian food, Indian cuisine is so spectacular. But another thing that makes India very special is our nature and our wildlife. And uh, I can hardly think of another country which has such an amazing kind of wildlife. We have orchids here, not found anywhere else. We have tigers, lions, leopards, snow leopards, elephants. We have amazing birds that are the great Indian bustard, which is found in India. There are so many things here as part of our Indian identity. I would say our wildlife and our nature is really special. We have so many mountain ranges, so many rivers. I think we're a very blessed country. And I would just say to every person who is watching that if you just take out a little bit of time in your life to look at nature around you, to find the nearest freshwater source, for example, or to find 10 birds around you, I think your life would be a little bit more rich because this is an incredibly rich country in terms we're incredibly blessed with all these natural resources. It would be a shame to not know them. I think we should just try to know them a bit more. And you can only love something that you know. You can't love it if you don't know that it exists. So just the
That's right.
beginning is just knowing it. So just go out there, find 10 birds or find, three mammals, find where the freshwater source is near you, like which is the closest place that's fresh water. Like it could be a wetland, it could be a river, it could be a stream, it could be a waterfall, anything. And it's like life is exploration, and it's nice to explore what is around us.
I think before I wind up, your friend is right there behind you.
Oh yeah,
I'll just say hi to him also. He was
yeah.
listening to
He
you.
he he got down. Come here, get up. Actually was sitting in this. I don't have any calls without him. Gypsy, come here. Get up. Come, come. He. I don't know if you can see him because he was
No, not
sleeping.
it. No. I mean, I saw him there some time back.
I think I
Oh,
should put him in the
wow.
frame.
That's great. Okay.
He was sleeping actually. I think he just woke up. That's why he looked so
Okay.
sleepy. Yeah.
So, Neha, thanks a lot taking your time out on a holiday and talking to us. I think it's more than almost an hour that we've had this discussion. Thanks a lot. It's been wonderful listening to your experiences, listening to your words of, I would say, wisdom and words of passion. Thanks a lot. I'll keep coming back to you for anything in this domain. We'll be in touch. Friends,
Thank you so
we
much,
close with
Arvind.
that. Thank you.